Hi, welcome to Popeye's House of Pain University. I'm Professor Popeye, your Dean of Mean. So sit down, shut the fuck up, and pay attention. Class is now in session. Today we're going to talk a little bit about the situation that's going on right now today. Jade Helm, Agenda 21. Jade Helm, if you're not familiar with this, you need to do a little bit of research, and I'll put some links down below. You can find some stuff to get you started. Jade Helm is a 7-state military action that is supposedly under the guise of training for urban environments. Well, one of the problems with this is they're telling us that they need to be able to do this in places such as Iraq or Afghanistan, and, well, they're saying it so that they can assimilate with the general populace. I see a real problem with that. Number one, we're talking about a bunch of Americans trying to assimilate with a bunch of Americans. What? Are we fucking serious? We're not talking about putting people that look, sound, and act different in a different environment and see if they can actually fit in. We're not talking about seeing if we can take apples and oranges and see if they can all look alike and act alike at the same time. No, we're not doing that. We're actually seeing if we can take some oranges and put them all in the same basket and see if you can tell the difference between one and another. What the fuck? I mentioned Agenda 21. This is directly connected, and for any of you that don't know what Agenda 21 is, it is the basic agenda of the Eugenics Society. And if you're not familiar with the Eugenics Society, this is something that was started many years ago. John D. Rockefeller and some of the elite got together and started to create this society that, on the surface, it looks like everything is all peachy keen. They're all about protecting the environment, saving the world. But ultimately, they're about reducing humanity. And essentially, they're looking at trying to get humanity down to somewhere in the neighborhood of about 500 million people worldwide. Well, there's a huge problem. There's about 7.5 billion people in this world. There's about 300 million people in the United States alone. And about 700 million somewhere in that neighborhood in China. Holy fuck, they're talking about a huge amount of death and destruction. Now, if you're not familiar with exactly what and how John D. Rockefeller got some of this started, he essentially worked on several different angles. From his perspective, he became one of the founding members of the National Eugenics Society. He also set up the medical programs in all the major universities at the time, handpicking the professors and the presidents and the curriculum. He spent a lot of money in setting up pharmaceutical companies. And then he also got the Federal Chemical Administration changed from that name to the Food and Drug Administration, so that Food and Drug Administration could become the watchdog, the protection agency for the pharmaceutical companies. So when the doctors shove all these different chemicals down your throat, you can't sue anybody. And of course, check all the warning labels. And I can assure you that on so many of these new compounds that they're trying to shove down your throat, one of the side effects happens to be death. Wow. I don't know if you see the link there, but I sure do. And it's something that you should look at. Then there's this little thing called the Council of Governors that essentially breaks the United States up into 10 different sectors. There is no more states. There is no more real control of the people, by the people, for the people. This is a small group of people that essentially have their own little sectors, several states per, and they get to say what happens. Again, this is called the Council of Governors. Do your research on this. It's been around for quite some time now. Then Another little thing that's been happening is so often people will say of one president or another, and I, again, don't give a fuck who's in office. Yes, Obama's in there right now, and he's a horrific tyrant. So is Bush, so is Clinton. They all are. They all are. If we keep letting sociopaths, narcissistic megalomaniacs in office to run things, this is what you get. Ever since Lincoln, there has been the Conscription Act. What's the Conscription Act, you ask? The Conscription Act was your very first martial law. So when people say, well, we might go under martial law this, we might go under... No, we've been under martial law ever since Lincoln and the Conscription Act. The way to verify this is just simply go back and check each and every acceptance speech and or State of the Union speech of every president. When a president gets his acceptance or he does that first State of the Union, he almost always has declared war, and it will be in one or the other, but they have all done it. They declare war on something. War on poverty, war on drugs, war on something. And it all seems so innocent and for the good. Well, good of what? I'm not really sure, but the good. Well, fact of the matter is, there is no good about it, because everything that they enact as far as any laws and or regulations or what have you that they do, the president does under martial law, is absolute during that time period. But as soon as martial law is lifted, all that goes away. Of course, this is something that they don't really want you to know. We have to wake up to some of these things, people. Now, one of the things that needs to be looked at, along with the Jade Helm, Agenda 21, the Eugenics Society, Council of Governors, and the fact that we already are under martial law. Don't kid yourself. Don't think that just because the military isn't marching in the streets right now that we're not already there. We have been for about 100 and almost 50 years now. So wake up. Look at the Walmart closures. Do your research on this. Look at the Walmart closures. Look at the tunnels, the Walmart tunnels that are connecting all these different Walmarts. These Walmarts that are being closed because there's supposedly plumbing problems. But yet, they're not pulling permits. There's no construction happening in these Walmarts. But yet, there seems to be an awful lot of military action around some of these Walmarts. Quite a few of them, actually. And, of course, what we're looking at is if they're part of a tunnel system and there's military action going on right now as we speak with Jade Helm 15 going on based on Agenda 21, you got to start asking yourself some questions here. You need to ask yourself questions like in this Jade Helm situation where there's been hundreds of thousands of units of antibiotics shipped to the military installations that are these temporary installations for this training exercise. Well, if it's just a training exercise, why do they need actual antibiotics and hundreds of thousands of units? That doesn't make any sense. They're also shipping in live hundreds of thousands of rounds, meals ready to eat. And, of course, there also happens to be grave liners, large plastic grave liners, large enough to hold 4 to 5 people each. If this is just a training exercise, you got to ask yourself, what the fuck do they need grave liners for? It's pretty simple. You have to start asking yourself these questions and come up with some of your own answers. Do some of your own research. Don't just take their word for it. Wake the fuck up with some of this shit. Because this comes down to one of two things. We're either going to go through a chrysalis or a crucible. We're either going to end up changing this world through people waking up and realizing that there's something bigger and better on the other side, and not have a lot of death and destruction and forging of something that may or may not be good, which would be the crucible. Because, quite frankly, if some of these things happen the way that they're looking like, it seems to be that there's about to be a huge military action. I already see a couple of false flags starting with some of this stuff too. The shooting in the church in South Carolina. And I'm not saying that people didn't die. No, but I do believe that the killer was not who we think he was. Just like a few others. Boston Marathon. Yeah, some people died. And I think that there's also some crisis actors there too. You need to start waking up to some of this stuff, people. They're trying to scare you. They're setting up for what seems to be the inevitable economic crash. Because, well, quite frankly, look around. Look at the financial situation this country is in. Look at what's happening with the gold and the fact that everybody wants their gold back. Look at the fact that Texas has compiled their gold as a state. They're looking like they're getting ready to go to war. Texas governor has called in the Texas National Guard, and it looks like he's getting prepared to throw some blows. I'm not saying that that's for sure what's actually going to happen. Man, some of you folks really need to start waking up and paying attention to some of what's going on here. Because it might be too late if you wake up one morning and you wake up to a gun sticking in your face and there's military personnel crawling through your house, confiscating your guns, and about to arrest you. If you don't have guns and you think that this is all just a ploy, watch what happens when people do start getting incarcerated, interned. Look at the fact that the U.S. Army has been hiring internment and resettlement specialists ever since June 2nd. Again, I'm going to be putting some links, so pay attention to this shit, people. It's real. The movements, the actions of our government, some of the things that have been done along the way, fairly quietly, it really means something. Just because you think that you've got your flat screen and your beer, everything is okay. Quit watching baseball. Quit watching basketball. Fucking turn that bullshit off. Turn the fucking TV off. Quit paying attention to the shit that they're using to distract you or scare you. Quit letting them program your brain. Start using your brain for thinking instead of just being afraid. Class dismissed.